Look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No, 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 no. Look at the top of his head. Look at his lips.
So about halfway through making this video, I realized I'm late to the Winter War video trend, and that this has been done many times already, so my bad. But this is honestly one of my favorite parts of World War II by sheer volume of meme potential. The utter ridiculousness of this David and Goliath scenario makes it, in my opinion, one of the greatest stories of military history. So this whole thing really begins in 1939. Although Finland had declared neutrality in what they saw as an upcoming war between the major powers, the Russians requested territory as a buffer zone. They wanted to secure more territory between Leningrad and the border, and wanted access to more ports to base their navy ships out of.
We should take the Finnish border and push it somewhere else!
They also requested the ability to station Red Army troops in Finnish territory. These same demands had already been met previously by the Balkans, effectively making them Soviet states, as they did not see a way to take on the massive Soviet military machine. The Finns, however, did not meet these Russian demands as they felt it encroached on the sovereignty of their nation, and all counteroffers they made were rejected by Moscow. As a result, the Russians decided to invade and have their demands met by force.
If you want your land, come and take your commitments. Venice.
Now, it's easy to judge this move with what we know now about how the Finns did in the war. But to truly understand the Russians' actions, you need to look at this scenario from their point of view in 1939. At the time, the Soviet Union is a highly industrialized country of over 150 million people, boasting the world's largest military. And Finland is a country of about 3.6 million people that is recovering from a civil war and has no professional army. What military equipment the Finns do have is either outdated or in very limited numbers. In the Russians' eyes, there's no way this can go bad for them. However, when planning the operation, they make a number of errors. The plan presented to Stalin by General Shaposhnikov called for a well-supplied central thrust towards the Finnish capital to crush resistance underneath the Red Army's weight for a fast, simple victory. This was rejected by Stalin, though, as the Germans had just stunned the world with their large concentric operations in Poland, and Stalin would not have the Red Army be outdone. So he went with this plan, created by General Voroshilov, which is a lot more complicated and impressive than the one put forward by Shaposhnikov. The issue with this is that the terrain in Poland is not the same as that of Finland. In Poland, roads are plentiful, and the terrain is fairly forgiving. In Finland, there are few roads, and the rest is frozen and wooded. So although you can move around like this in Poland, it's very difficult to do so, especially with large vehicles, in Finland. Because no matter how much you want to move, you can only go where the roads will let you, which the Finns use greatly to their advantage. The Russians also believe that the former Reds in the Finnish Civil War will join the Red Army as it passes through. But since the Whites took power, the Finnish economy has done very well, and a sense of patriotism has taken hold in the country, so that being a Finn would trump political ideology when any foreign power invaded. The Russians miss this point entirely in their intelligence of the Finnish political structure. The third mistake they make is a short deadline. Stalin hopes for the whole thing to be won in about 2 weeks, and ordered his commanders to plan for this. This, however, indirectly takes away most of the advantage the Soviet Union has in being an industrial power, as if the war goes on for longer than 2 weeks, and spoiler alert, it does, the Soviets have to halt, bring up more supplies, and replan their attack. The Finns only have about 20 to 25 days worth of ammunition by their estimates at the outbreak of the war. But with the Soviets limiting their supplies so much, planning for just that 2-week window, the Finns begin the war, in effect, having more ammunition than the Soviets do. On November 30th, 1939, Soviet forces invade with 21 divisions, totaling 450,000 men. Much to their shock, though, the attack bogs down very quickly as the Finns begin to put up a stiff resistance with thousands of trained reservists they call up. And this is where we get to the more commonly known parts of the Winter War. The Finns, after getting over initial fears, begin to play heavily to their strengths and to the Russians' reliance on the roads. The Finns relied on what they called moti, or encirclement tactics. The Finns found that the Russians moved in long columns on the roads. So instead of fighting the Russians head-on, they would stop the column at various places, cut off smaller pockets, and then pick off Soviet troops from the forest, or attack quickly on skis or on foot, then slip away. This was typically done by stopping the leading vehicles by knocking them out, or even just by blocking the road with fallen trees or debris. Because the Finns had few anti-tank guns and rifles, the main anti-tank weapon used by the Finnish army was the Molotov cocktail, named after the Soviet foreign minister by the Finns during the war. These encirclements and attacks were made easier to accomplish by the fact that the Russians, with all their loud vehicles and brown uniforms in the snow, made themselves very easy to locate. The Russians, on the other hand, could not hear the Finns approach, as they had to keep their engines running so that they would not freeze in the extreme temperatures. The result was the Finns owned the forest and the Russians feared them, letting the Finns often stop advances at will. Many Russian soldiers caught in the Montes were also cut off from supplies, and starvation and ammunition problems began to set in. The Finns, on the other hand, would capture and redistribute weapons and ammunition at a rapid pace to where the Finns had more material at the end of the war than they did at the beginning. The Russians did see quite a bit of success in the north, though, as Finnish troop concentrations were lesser there. The main Finnish defense line was called the Mannerheim Line, named after the leader of the Finnish forces. The Mannerheim Line, unlike many of its contemporaries such as the Maginot Line, was very basic defensive structure, composed of trenches, logs, and rocks with a few concrete structures. In the Finnish terrain, though, this was an extremely effective defensive structure once the Russians were funneled into it. By the end of December, with Soviet troops stretched so thin, Stalin was very unhappy with the results of the attack and gave Shaposhnikov full control and replaced Voroshilov with Simeon Timoshenko. The attack plan was redrawn to about what Shaposhnikov had prepared in the first place, with a strong thrust through the Karelian Isthmus on February 11th. By March 5th, the Finns realized they were beaten and sued for peace, relinquishing 11% of their territory and 30% of their pre-war economic assets. And this is the part that most people forget, that the Red Army did triumph, albeit with about 10 men killed per square mile gained, very rough approximate, but they eventually won. But it was a bitter victory.
Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
Now, aside from the novelty factor, this war has been somewhat buried in the history books, and many write it off as a waste of time, and it's easy to see why with the avoidable loss of life. But I think this war had a few impacts that do influence later events. First, and probably least important, it sways the Finns to join Hitler when he invades the Soviet Union in 1941. And although they mostly just recapture lost territory from 1940, every Soviet soldier fighting the Finnish invasion is one less fighting the Germans. I believe without the Winter War, the Finns may have stayed out of the war altogether, and it was the hostilities against them that made them feel like they had to take a side. Second, it taught the Soviets firsthand how to fight in the bitter cold, and when the Germans came close to Moscow, some Finnish tactics such as ski troops were used. But lastly, and in my opinion the biggest impact, is the reputation of the Red Army to the German Army. After the purges, then Poland, and now this, the Red Army looks extremely incompetent. The Germans had to be thinking that if the Soviets had trouble taking on a citizen army in Finland, how well could they do against the full force of the German army? I'm not trying to imply direct causation. There is a whole video worth of reasons that the Germans decide to invade the Soviet Union, but the Winter War does support the later proved to be false idea of kicking in the door and the whole rotten structure falling in. Special thank you to Thomas Yip for creating the video and drawing of the Finnish gondola. He actually does these by commission, and down below I'll link his Instagram and Patreon if you want to commission one for yourself. Also check out his YouTube channel while you're down there too. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.